January 2026. While most of the world was still exchanging New Year wishes, a different kind of news began spreading in Venezuela. Not from the United Nations, not from the International Criminal Court, not from any official statement. It appeared on social media. Nicolas Maduro was gone. No public hearing, no extradition order, no courtroom images, only silence. And in geopolitics, silence is rarely empty. It usually means someone is already in control. 3 days earlier, U.S. President Donald Trump had stood at a podium, wishing the world peace and prosperity. A familiar speech, a familiar message, a familiar diplomatic ritual. Then, days later, Washington sent its strongest signal to Latin America in decades. No declaration of war, no international resolution, no multilateral coalición, just action, fast, clean, and quiet. The question is simple. What really happened? Was this a counter-narcotics operation? An effort to enforce international law? Was it about oil? About the largest proven reserves on Earth? Or was it something deeper? A move in the global power competition? In modern history, it is rare for a head of state to disappear without a clear legal process. Normally, there are 3 steps: accusation, trial, verdict. Here, those steps are replaced by a void, a legal vacuum. No international institution managed to fill. This did not look like a coup. No tanks in the streets. No crowds storming presidential palaces. It did not look like a revolution. No slogans. No new leaders. It looked like surgery. Precise. Cold. Performed by those holding the scalpel. Within days, financial markets reacted. Embassies held emergency meetings. Energy companies monitored every signal. No one asked, "Was this right?" They asked, "Who controls what's left?" Because in international politics, morality is rarely the main issue. Power is. So to understand why Venezuela became a target and why Maduro became expendable, we need to rewind, not to 2026, not even to 2020, but more than 2 decades earlier, to the moment when oil stopped being just a source of wealth and became a tool of power. Hugo Chavez took office as president of Venezuela. He did not arrive as a technocrat. He did not arrive as a Wall Street favorite. He arrived as a former soldier, with a revolution in his vocabulary. His message was simple. The system was rigged. The elites were corrupt. The people had been robbed, and oil would fix it. At the time, Venezuela was sitting on a fortune, the largest proven oil reserves on Earth. More than Saudi Arabia, more than Iran, more than Iraq. But most Venezuelans were poor. For decades, oil money had flowed upward into political families, foreign corporations, and offshore accounts. Chavez promised to reverse that flow. His first move was control. State oil company PDVSA had long operated like a semi-independent empire. Engineers, managers, and executives made decisions with little political oversight. To Chavez, that was unacceptable. Oil was not just an industry, it was the state. Between 2002 and 2003, he purged PDVSA. More than 18,000 workers were fired. Technocrats were replaced by loyalists. Efficiency was replaced by obedience. From that moment on, oil production stopped being a technical process. It became a political one. With PDVSA under control, Chavez redesigned the economy. Oil revenue funded everything. Free healthcare, free education, subsidized food, massive public housing. Poverty fell. Literacy rose. Chavez's popularity exploded. For millions, he was not a president. He was a provider. But dependency was being built. Venezuela stopped investing in agriculture, stopped modernizing industry, stopped diversifying exports. Why bother? Oil paid for everything. At the same time, Chavez weaponized energy. He sold oil at discounts to Cuba, Nicaragua, Bolivia. In return, he gained political loyalty. He financed leftist movements across Latin America. Venezuela was no longer just a country. It was a regional hub. Washington noticed. By the mid-2000s, Chavez had become America's loudest critic in the Western Hemisphere. He called the U.S. an empire. He called its leaders devils. But he kept selling oil to them, because ideology has limits. Markets do not. By 2012, oil accounted for over 95% of exports, more than half of government revenue, almost all foreign currency. Venezuela was rich and fragile. When Chavez died in 2013, he did not leave behind strong institutions. He left behind a machine, a system fueled by oil, loyalty, and subsidies. A system that worked only as long as prices stayed high. And prices never stay high forever. The question was no longer whether the system would crack. It was when and who would be standing when it did. Hugo Chavez was gone. What remained was a system built on oil money, political loyalty, and permanent subsidies. And now, someone had to operate it without the man who designed it. That person was Nicolas Maduro, a former bus driver, a former union organizer, a loyal Chavez insider. He was chosen not for charisma, not for economic skill, not for global influence. He was chosen for loyalty. From the beginning, Maduro inherited a trap. The state spent more than it earned. Imports were paid with oil dollars. Food, medicine, and fuel were subsidized. As long as oil prices stayed high, the machine worked. When they fell, everything broke. In 2014, oil prices collapsed from over $100 per barrel to less than 40. For Venezuela, this was catastrophic. Government revenue vanished. Foreign reserves dried up. Imports became impossible. The system had no backup. Maduro did not reform it. He doubled down. Instead of cutting spending, he printed money. Instead of liberalizing markets, he tightened controls. Instead of inviting investment, he blamed enemies. Economic reality was treated as a political threat. Hyperinflation followed. Prices doubled, then tripled, then exploded. At its peak, inflation reached millions of percent. A monthly salary could no longer buy bread. Savings turned into paper. Money stopped working. Production collapsed. Oil output fell by more than half. Refineries broke down. Power grids failed. Water systems collapsed. Skilled workers left. Doctors, engineers, technicians. They crossed borders on foot. By the millions. By 2018, Venezuela was no longer in recession. It was in systemic failure. Hospitals had no medicine. Supermarkets had empty shelves. Schools had no teachers. But the political structure remained. Because repression replaced legitimacy. Elections were controlled. Courts were loyal. Media was silenced. Opposition leaders were jailed or exiled. The state stopped competing. It started surviving. Sanctions followed. The United States and its allies targeted oil exports, banking, and officials. Officially, to pressure Maduro. In practice, they accelerated collapse. The economy shrank further. Living standards fell deeper. Ordinary citizens paid the price. Maduro adapted. He turned to new partners. Russia for weapons. Iran for fuel. China for loans. Gold replaced oil. Cryptocurrency replaced banking. Smuggling replaced trade. A shadow economy emerged. By 2022, Venezuela had stabilized. Not through recovery, through exhaustion. People stopped expecting anything. The system did not function. It persisted. Maduro was no longer building a country. He was managing decline, maintaining control over ruins, keeping elites paid, keeping security forces loyal, keeping foreign allies interested. That was enough, for a while, because systems built on decline eventually reach a limit. And when they do, control is no longer guaranteed. By the mid-2020s, Venezuela was no longer just a domestic problem. It had become a piece on a global chessboard. While Maduro struggled to maintain control, China had quietly become a major player. Decades of loans had turned Venezuela into a debtor state. Billions in credit were exchanged for oil. Loans, infrastructure projects, and trade agreements tied Caracas to Beijing. By 2025, roughly 80% of Venezuela's oil exports were destined for China. The country was no longer merely exporting energy. It was exporting strategic leverage, a reserve for the Chinese economy in case of crisis elsewhere. From Washington's perspective, this created a strategic problem. The United States controlled the hemisphere through alliances, sanctions, and influence. Venezuela, under Maduro, was a sovereign state outside that control. And through oil, it was strengthening a strategic competitor. The problem was not the barrels themselves. Venezuela's production was under 1 million barrels per day, small compared to U.S. production of over 13 million barrels per day, small compared to the scale of the global market. Economically, it was insignificant. Politically, it was dangerous. This is where geopolitics begins to overshadow economics. By 2025, the Trump administration had redefined its priorities in the Western Hemisphere. Latin America was no longer a distant concern. It was a strategic zone that needed to be secured. Any state that provided resources or political cover to competitors was a risk to be managed. In this context, controlling Venezuela's oil was not about profit. It was about denying leverage to China, about shaping regional power in Washington's favor. The operation to capture Maduro was prepared with this in mind. It was not impulsive. It was not symbolic. It was a calculated move to reset the balance of influence. CIA operatives had infiltrated Caracas months before. Delta Force rehearsed the operation repeatedly. Naval assets and air power were deployed quietly to the Caribbean. Drones were used in a coordinated strike. Every step was measured. By the early hours of January 3, 2026, the operation succeeded. Maduro was captured. His wife was taken. They were flown to New York. 3 hours, no failure. From a tactical perspective, it was flawless. From a legal perspective, it was unprecedented. No extradition treaty, no international approval, no courtroom process in Venezuela. From a strategic perspective, it sent a signal. The United States would act alone when it deemed necessary. Allies and adversaries would have to adjust. China, watching closely, understood the limits of its influence. The event reshaped alliances. In Latin America, countries like Colombia and Brazil drew closer to Washington. Countries like Cuba, Nicaragua, and Bolivia moved closer to Beijing and Moscow. A line had been drawn. The hemisphere was no longer neutral. Every state had to choose a side. At the same time, global observers in Asia, Europe, and Africa questioned the stability of international norms. If the United States could act unilaterally, could others? What precedent had been set? The chessboard had been rearranged, and the next moves were anyone's guess. The capture of Maduro was not just an operation. It was a statement. Within hours, the world began to react. Allies, adversaries, and observers were forced to reconsider their assumptions. In Venezuela, power shifted immediately. Vice President Delcy Rodriguez assumed the presidency. The political machinery of the state remained intact. Most of the bureaucrats, military officers, and local leaders stayed in place. The change was surgical. The top was removed, but the structure endured. A few gestures were made to signal cooperation with the United States. Some political prisoners were released. Limited reforms were announced. But the opposition, including figures like Maria Corina Machado, was largely sidelined. Washington's messages were inconsistent. Trump suggested control and oversight. Other officials insisted on no direct governance. The objective was clear: stabilize, secure resources, and control influence. Democracy was not the priority. Internationally, reactions were polarized. Russia, China, and Cuba condemned the operation. They called it a violation of international law and sovereignty. The United Nations expressed concern over precedent. Meanwhile, some countries like Argentina, Israel, and Ukraine expressed approval. The geopolitical map had been redrawn. Allies were rewarded, rivals were warned. The hemisphere was divided more sharply than ever. For ordinary Venezuelans, life remained chaotic. Some celebrated in the streets, mostly expatriates and urban elites. Others protested, especially supporters of Maduro. Hyperinflation, food shortages, and infrastructure collapse continued. The system remained fragile. Globally, the precedent was troubling. If the United States could act unilaterally in the Western Hemisphere, other powers might feel emboldened elsewhere. Taiwan, Ukraine, or other disputed regions now faced new uncertainties. The rules of international conduct were no longer guaranteed. Venezuela itself was left with a paradox. The political machine survived. The economy continued to collapse. Foreign alliances shifted. The state was stabilized just enough to maintain control. Oil flowed, but under new political oversight. Beijing lost leverage, Washington gained it. The long-term consequences remain uncertain. History shows that imposing order through force rarely creates stability. Democracy, prosperity, and legitimacy do not emerge from tactical victories alone. Instead, the potential for resistance, insurgency, and civil unrest increases. Power has been reset, but control is never absolute. The Venezuelan crisis is now a case study in modern geopolitics. How a country rich in resources can be leveraged as a strategic tool. How global superpowers calculate risk and reward. And how ordinary citizens are often collateral in these larger games. In the end, one question remains unanswered. Can Venezuela recover from decades of mismanagement, corruption, and external interference? Or has it entered a new chapter where survival, not progress, defines its reality? The answer is not in the headlines. It is in the months and years to come. The chessboard has been reset. The pieces are in motion, and the world is watching.